A $10,000 first-class ticket, a multi-billion-dollar deal on the line, and a seat, 1A, that was rightfully hers. But when Dr. Alani Williams, a powerhouse CEO, boarded her flight, she found her seat occupied by an entitled passenger who refused to move. The confrontation that followed was shocking, escalating from quiet privilege to ugly, overt racism. But what happened next, just seconds later, no one could have predicted. The jet bridge slammed back into place, the doors burst open, and the entire flight was grounded. Not because of the seat, but because of a devastating secret the passenger was hiding. The air in the American Airlines flagship first lounge at JFK's Terminal 8 was a meticulously curated illusion of calm. It hummed with the discreet clinking of heavy glassware and the whisper-soft tread of attendants. Dr. Alani Williams sat in a high-backed alcove, the Financial Times open on the table, though her focus was on the secured PDF on her tablet. Project Solstice, Final Acquisition Terms. Alani was not just a passenger, she was a force. At 42, she was the founder and CEO of Ethelred Renewables, a company that had gone from a Silicon Valley startup to a global leader in green energy infrastructure in just under a decade. She was dressed in a dark teal raw silk blazer, her hair in meticulous, shoulder-length twists. She was flying to London, not for leisure, but to close the most important deal of her career, a deal that would save a struggling British green tech firm, Solstice Green Energy, from insolvency. Her seat, 1A on AA 100, was more than just a preference. It was a necessity. It was the desk from which she would conduct her final review, the bed in which she would get a precisely calculated 5 hours of sleep, and the bubble from which she would emerge in London, ready for battle. She checked her watch, a simple, elegant Jaeger LeCoultre. 6:15 p.m. Boarding would begin in 20 minutes. Across the lounge, a different kind of energy radiated. A couple, perhaps in their late 50s, were holding court near the bar. The woman, Caroline Baxter, was draped in a beige pashmina that matched her heavily logoed Louis Vuitton carry-on. Her voice was a sharp, braying instrument that cut through the lounge's engineered serenity. Her husband, David Baxter, thick-necked and florid in a tight-collared polo, laughed loudly at something on his phone, oblivious to the annoyed glances he was receiving. Alani registered them with the same fleeting disinterest she reserved for any mild temporary annoyance, like a slow Wi-Fi signal. They were background noise. Caroline's gaze swept the room, her eyes a practiced instrument of appraisal. They skimmed over Alani, lingered for a half-second, and then dismissed her. In that brief moment, Alani saw it all, the casual assumption of superiority, the reflexive categorization. Alani was, to this woman, invisible wallpaper. The boarding announcement for AA 100 began, starting with concierge key members, an elite, invitation-only tier. Alani, a member for 6 years, packed her tablet into her sleek leather attaché case. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked toward the gate. She was the first to board, greeting the cabin crew with a quiet, "Good evening." "Good evening, Dr. Williams," the purser, a man named Jeremy, replied, checking her name on his manifest. "A pleasure to have you back with us. 1A is right this way." "Thank you, Jeremy. I'll just have a sparkling water before takeoff, please. No lemon." "Of course." She settled into 1A, the coveted window, jazz or bulkhead seat in the flagship first cabin. The space was a suite with its own swiveling chair and desk. She slipped off her heels, placed them in the designated shoe compartment, and pulled out her noise-cancelling headphones. She began her pre-flight ritual: hand sanitizer, a small bottle of lavender-scented lotion, and opening her encrypted laptop. She had work to do. The rest of the first-class cabin began to fill. a Japanese businessman, a British actress she vaguely recognized, a family with a quiet child. Then she heard them. "David, this is just adequate." Caroline Baxter's voice sliced through the cabin. "I told you we should have taken the BA flight. Their first cabin has much more panache." "It's fine, dear. We'll be in London by morning," David grumbled, already trying to wedge his oversized golf bag umbrella into the overhead bin, despite the flight attendant's polite offers to stow it. Alani didn't look up. She was deep in a complex financial model, her brow furrowed. She heard the Baxters settle into 1B and 1D, the two seats in the middle. There was a brief, huffy argument about who had more legroom, which David summarily lost. Alani's focus was absolute. She was calculating the risk-to-reward ratio of absorbing Solstice's unexpected debt load. Her CFO, Richard, believed the company was being deliberately undervalued by its primary creditors, a shadowy holding firm called Baxter Holdings. It was Alani's job to find out why. "Excuse me," a flight attendant, a young man named Liam, murmured. "Dr. Williams, your sparkling water." "Thank you, Liam," she said, her voice warm but professional. She took the glass, her eyes never leaving the screen. She was so absorbed that she didn't realize she had left her cashmere travel wrap on the seat's footstool. After a few minutes, feeling a draft, she unbuckled her belt to stand and retrieve it from her overhead bag. She was gone for perhaps 30 seconds. When she turned around, Caroline Baxter was sitting in her seat. Not just resting, but settled. Her beige pashmina was arranged over the seat, her high-end designer purse was on the console, and she was busily examining her makeup in a gold-plated compact. Alani paused, assuming it was a simple, embarrassing mistake. "Excuse me," Alani said, her voice calm and neutral. "I believe you're in my seat." Caroline didn't look up. She snapped the compact shut. "Oh, I don't think so, dear." "I'm in 1A, Alani said, holding up her boarding pass, which was still in her hand. "This is 1A. Caroline finally, slowly, turned her head. Her eyes, pale and cold, raked Alani up and down. "Well, that's a problem, isn't it? My husband and I are in the middle, and I prefer a window. This one is much better. You can just take my seat over there." Alani felt a familiar, cold spike of adrenaline. It was the same feeling she got before a hostile board meeting. She kept her voice perfectly level. "My boarding pass says 1A. Your boarding pass is for 1D. I'd like you to move, please." David Baxter, from the middle seat, now leaned over. "Hey now, my wife just asked you nicely. What's the big deal? Just swap. It's a win-win. She gets the window, you get to sit with, well, you get the aisle." "The big deal, sir, is that I am in my assigned, paid-for seat. This is not a negotiation," Alani said, her gaze fixed on Caroline. "Please move." Caroline let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a practiced, ugly sound. "My goodness, you're being very aggressive, aren't you? People like you always seem to want to make a scene." The cabin, once filled with the quiet rustle of magazines, went silent. The coded language hung in the air, thick and toxic. "People like you." Alani felt the blood rush to her face, but her expression remained a mask of professional granite. "I'm not making a scene. I am asking you for the final time to move from my seat." "Or what?" Caroline sneered, crossing her arms. "What are you going to do about it?" The silence that followed Caroline's challenge was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and polite pre-flight chatter out of the first-class cabin. Every eye was now fixed on the confrontation at 1A. The British actress looked up from her script, her mouth a small O of surprise. The Japanese businessman, sensing the shift, slowly removed his earbuds. Alani Williams stood in the aisle, her attaché case still in her left hand, her boarding pass in her right. She was a study in controlled stillness. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesticulate. She simply held her ground, a fixed point against which Caroline Baxter's chaotic entitlement was crashing. "I'm not going to do anything," Alani stated, her voice cutting through the stillness with surgical precision. "I am going to wait for the cabin crew to resolve this, as per airline policy. But I assure you, I will be sitting in this seat when this plane leaves for London." Caroline scoffed, turning to her husband. "David, can you believe this? She's threatening me." "No one is threatening you, Caroline," Alani said, her patience now visibly and intentionally evaporating. She was done playing defense. "You are sitting in a seat that does not belong to you. You are delaying the boarding process. Move." "I will not be spoken to this way," Caroline shrieked, her voice climbing an octave. "Flight attendant, this woman is harassing me. I feel unsafe." This was the classic, textbook maneuver, the weaponization of fragility. Alani had seen it deployed in boardrooms, usually more subtly, to undermine her authority. To see it here, so raw and blatant, was almost archaic. Liam, the young flight attendant who had served her water, hurried over, his face pale and blotchy. "Ma'am? Dr. Williams? Is there a problem?" "Yes, Liam, there is," Alani said, turning to him. She did not point. She did not accuse. She simply stated facts. "This passenger is in my seat, 1A. Her seat is 1D. She has refused to move." Liam looked at Caroline, who was now performing for the cabin, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "Oh, this is just awful. She came over here and just attacked me. I'm shaking. I need a window seat. I get terrible anxiety." "Ma'am," Liam said, his voice trembling slightly. He was woefully out of his depth. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" "I don't need to show you my boarding pass," Caroline snapped. "I'm in this seat. Now go get me a glass of champagne and tell the captain to get this thing in the air. We're late." David Baxter, seeing his wife's manufactured distress and the flight attendant's weakness, saw his opening. He stood up, a large, physically imposing man. He puffed out his chest, attempting to loom over Alani, who was a good 6 inches shorter, but did not yield an inch of ground. "Look," David said, his voice a low, threatening rumble. "I don't know how you got a ticket for this cabin, but we've been flying this route for 20 years. We're million-milers. My wife is upset. Just take the other seat and be quiet. It's a simple request." The implication was as clear as the diamond on his gaudy pinky ring. "You don't belong here." "I don't care if you've flown 1 billion miles," Alani replied, her gaze shifting to David. His cologne was overpowering, a cheap, musky scent. "Your travel history does not give you the right to steal my seat. And for the record," she added, her voice dropping to a confidential icy whisper, "I'm a concierge key member. So perhaps you should be the one to be quiet and sit down." David's face went from florid to a deep, apoplectic purple. The mention of concierge key, a status he did not have, was a direct hit to his ego. He was outranked. "Why, you arrogant," he sputtered, taking a half step toward her. "Sir," Liam yelped, finally finding his voice, "please sit down. You cannot speak to another passenger that way." "She's the one causing the problem," David roared, pointing a thick finger at Alani. "She's probably one of those diversity hires, given a free ticket to make the airline look good." The mask was off. The thin veneer of civility had been sandblasted away, revealing the raw, ugly prejudice beneath. Alani Williams actually smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile she reserved for opposing counsel who had just fatally miscalculated. You've just made this very, very simple, she said. She turned away from the Baxters, dismissing them completely, and looked at Liam. Liam, you are now a witness to a passenger creating an actively hostile and discriminatory environment. This is no longer a seat dispute. This is a passenger misconduct issue. I need you to get your purser, or the captain, immediately. If you don't, I will press the call button until someone else does. This plane is not taking off with these people in this cabin. Liam, galvanized by her authority, nodded sharply. Right away, Dr. Williams. He scrambled toward the galley. Caroline, realizing her performance had backfired, tried a new tactic. She stood up, grabbing her purse. Fine. I don't want the stupid seat anyway. This entire airline is just trash. She expected Alani to move. Alani did not. She stood firmly in the aisle, blocking Caroline's exit. Excuse me, Caroline hissed. Are you going to move? In a moment, Alani said. First, I'm going to take my seat. Then, I'm going to watch you take yours. With deliberate, unhurried grace, Alani stepped past the fuming Caroline, sat down in 1A, and calmly buckled her seatbelt. She picked up her tablet, opened the Project Solstice file, and looked up at the apoplectic woman. Now, Alani said, it's your turn to move. Please take your seat. 1RD, the middle one. It was a total, comprehensive, and humiliating defeat. Caroline Baxter looked as if she had been slapped. She was trembling with a rage so profound it left her speechless. She shot a look of pure venom at Alani, then turned and stomped to 1D, throwing herself into the seat with a dramatic, bone-jarring thud. David Baxter glared at Alani, muttered a string of profanities under his breath, and sat down next to his wife. The cabin was silent. Alani turned her attention back to her screen, her heart beat a steady, strong drum. She had won. The purser, Jeremy, appeared. Dr. Williams, I was told there was a... It's been resolved, Jeremy, Alani said, not looking up. Thank you, but I would like to file a formal complaint about passengers 1D and 1B upon landing. Of course, Doctor... Jeremy was cut off by the click hiss of the cockpit door opening. Captain Foley was a man who looked like he had been carved from the same aluminum as the 777 he flew. He was tall, silver-haired, and possessed an air of absolute, unshakable authority. He did not look amused. He stepped out of the cockpit, followed by Jeremy, who looked profoundly unhappy. Good evening, folks. Captain Foley's voice boomed in the enclosed space, instantly commanding attention. I'm Captain Foley, and I've been told we're having a disagreement that is preventing my crew from securing the cabin for departure. He walked down the aisle, his eyes scanning the cabin. He stopped at the first row, his gaze landing on Alani, who was in her seat, and the Baxters, who were simmering in theirs. I understand, he said, his voice dropping, that there was a dispute over seat 1A. Before Alani could speak, Caroline unbuckled and leaped to her feet. Captain, thank God! This woman, she pointed, her finger shaking, has been harassing us since we boarded. She was aggressive, threatening, and frankly, I think she's unstable. She called my husband a racist. David, emboldened, stood up as well. It's true, Captain. We just tried to... Sit down, Foley said. It was not a request. David Baxter's mouth snapped shut, and he sat. Caroline remained standing, her mouth agape. Ma'am, sit down, the captain repeated. You do not stand when a captain is addressing you on his aircraft. You are not at a garden party. Humiliated, Caroline sank back into her seat. Captain Foley turned his gaze to Alani. Dr. Williams, I see you are in 1A. Is this your assigned seat? It is, Captain, Alani said, holding up her boarding pass. And was there an issue? Yes, Captain. Mrs. Baxter was sitting in my seat and refused to move. When I insisted, Mr. Baxter became verbally abusive and discriminatory. He accused me of being a diversity hire who was given a free ticket. The captain's face did not change, but his eyes, a very pale blue, seemed to get colder. He turned to the Baxters. "Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, is this true?" "It's a misunderstanding," David blustered. "She's twisting our words. We're the victims here." "Captain," Alani interjected, her voice still quiet, but now laced with steel. "The entire cabin was witness. Your flight attendant, Liam, was a witness. I'm a CEO on my way to a critical business meeting. I have zero interest in misunderstandings. I have an interest in a safe, professional, and non-hostile flight environment. What I received from these two passengers was overt racism and verbal aggression. Frankly, I do not feel comfortable flying for 8 hours with them." The finality of her statement hung in the air. This was no longer about a seat. This was about security. Captain Foley nodded slowly. He understood. He had crossed a line from customer service to federal aviation regulations. The pilot has ultimate authority, and that authority is built on one principle: safety. A passenger who is aggressive, discriminatory, and non-compliant before takeoff is a severe safety risk. "I see," he said. He looked at the Baxters. His voice was now devoid of any warmth. "Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, we have a problem. My first-class cabin is not a debate society. It is not a place for you to verbally abuse other passengers. It is not a place for you to ignore crew instructions. And it is certainly not a place for you to throw around racist vitriol." "How dare you!" Caroline shrieked, finding her voice. We are... "You are what, ma'am? Million-milers. Important. Everyone on this plane is important. Everyone on this plane has a right to be treated with dignity. You two have failed that test." He pressed the call button above his head. "Jeremy, please have ground security meet the aircraft." Caroline Baxter's face drained of all color. What does that mean?" "It means," Captain Foley said, "that your journey with American Airlines ends here. You, your husband, and your luggage are being removed from my flight." "You can't do this!" David roared, standing up again. "This is insane! We have a meeting! We will sue you! We will sue this entire airline! We will have your job!" "You can't sue me for doing my job, sir. And my job is to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers, including Dr. Williams. You have proven you are incapable of being on this aircraft. You are a security risk." "Security risk?" Caroline was now sobbing, real tears of rage and humiliation. "Because of a seat?" "No, ma'am," Captain Foley said, stepping back to let the purser through. "Because of your character." The cabin was tomb silent. Alani let out a slow, quiet breath. It was over, or so she thought. As David Baxter stood, red-faced and trembling, ready to either fight or flee, a sudden, loud thud echoed through the cabin. It was the unmistakable sound of the jet bridge reattaching to the fuselage. A few seconds later, the cabin door, which had been armed and ready for departure, was disarmed. The captain's expression, for the first time, shifted from in control to confused. He hadn't called for the jet bridge. He had called for airport security at the bottom of the ramp. A tense voice crackled over the PA system. It wasn't the captain's, it was the gate agent. "Captain Foley, please come to the forward entry door. There is a situation." Caroline Baxter suddenly stopped crying. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She looked at Alani. "Well, well," she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. "It looks like they're here. But I don't think they're here for us, dear." She was looking past Alani, past the captain, to the now opening door. The plane door hissed open. Standing in the doorway were not the blue-uniformed airport police or even Port Authority officers. They were two individuals, a man and a woman, in dark, impeccably tailored business suits that screamed federal. They wore serious, unsmiling faces and carried an aura of authority that made Captain Foley's presence seem, by comparison, almost quaint. "Captain Foley," the man, Agent Hayes, said. He had a clipped, no-nonsense voice. He flashed a badge. "FBI, we need to come aboard." "What is this about?" Foley asked, his own authority now challenged. "It's a federal matter, Captain. We'll be quick." The two agents stepped onto the aircraft. Their eyes, sharp and analytical, swept the first-class cabin. They registered the Baxters, standing in the aisle, and Alani, seated and watching, her expression a mask of confusion. Caroline Baxter, seeing the FBI badges, had a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. She was convinced they were here for Alani. The racist logic in her mind was simple. Black woman in first class, causing trouble. Must be a criminal. "Right here, officers," Caroline said, her voice bright and helpful. "This woman has been causing a terrible disturbance. She's been threatening us." Agent Hayes didn't even look at her. His gaze was fixed on her husband. Agent Price, his partner, held up a photo on her phone. She compared it to David Baxter. "David Allen Baxter?" Agent Price asked. Her voice was flat. David Baxter, who had been enjoying his wife's attempted redirection, froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty, sick-looking grey. "Yes," he managed, his voice a dry croak. "I'm Agent Price. This is Agent Hayes. We're with the White Collar Crime Division." Caroline's smile twitched and died. "White collar? What? David? What is this?" "Mr. Baxter," Agent Hayes said, stepping forward. He was now directly in front of David, blocking him. "You are under arrest by order of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York." "Arrest?" Caroline's voice was a barely audible squeak. "For what?" David blustered, but the words had no conviction. He was shrinking before their eyes. "For 12 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of securities fraud, 4 counts of conspiracy to commit money laundering, and 1 count of embezzlement," Agent Hayes recited, as if reading a grocery list. The agent pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs locking was the loudest sound Alani had ever heard. Pandemonium. Caroline let out a scream that was part animal, part grief. "No, you can't. This is a mistake. We're respected. David, tell them." "Sir, you have the right to remain silent," Agent Price began, reading him his Miranda rights, as Agent Hayes guided the now docile David Baxter toward the door. "Caroline!" David yelled, his face a mask of terror. "Call Robert! Call our lawyer! Call him now!" "This is ridiculous!" Caroline shrieked, grabbing Agent Price's arm. "You can't just—" "Ma'am," Agent Price said, grabbing Caroline's wrist and removing it with practiced ease. "You need to step back. You're interfering with a federal arrest." "I'm his wife." "We know," Agent Hayes said, pausing at the door. "Caroline Baxter, you are not under arrest at this time. However, you are a person of material interest in this investigation. Your passport has been flagged. You will not be leaving the country. You will be served a subpoena to appear before a grand jury by the end of the night. Do not try to leave this airport." The color, the fight, the very life seemed to drain out of Caroline Baxter. She stumbled back, falling into a seat, 1D, as if her bones had turned to liquid. David Baxter was led off the plane, his head bowed. The entire cabin was silent, phones held high, recording every second. The man who, 5 minutes earlier, had been a roaring lion of privilege, was now a shackled, defeated old man in a polo shirt. Captain Foley, who had watched the entire scene with a stunned, professional detachment, stepped back into the cabin. He looked at Agent Price. Is that all, Agent?" "Not quite, Captain," she said. "We have a warrant for their luggage. All of it. It needs to be removed from the cargo hold. And, I'm afraid, per federal protocol, this aircraft is now a secondary crime scene. No one can leave until we've swept their seats and immediate area for any discarded items." A collective groan went up from the cabin. Captain Foley's shoulders slumped. He knew what this meant. He picked up the PA microphone. His voice, usually so steady, was laced with exhaustion. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a security event involving the arrest of several passengers by federal agents, this aircraft is now under federal jurisdiction." He took a deep breath. "We will be required to deplane all passengers. The associated security sweeps and the removal of cargo mean we will not be making our scheduled departure time. Seconds later, the flight is grounded." He let the words sink in. American Airlines Flight 100 to London, Heathrow, is officially and indefinitely delayed. We are grounded. Alani Williams sat in 1A. She looked at the empty seat, 1B, where David Baxter had been. She looked at Caroline Baxter, who was slumped in 1D, not crying, but just staring, vacant-eyed, at the bulkhead. The confrontation, the racism, the fight over the seat. It all seemed so small, so petty, in the face of what had just happened. The woman who had tried to steal her seat had, in the span of 10 minutes, lost her husband, her vacation, her reputation, and by the sound of it, her entire life. This wasn't just karma. This was a biblical-level reckoning. The deplaning process was a surreal, somber affair. The normal hustle of a cancelled flight, passengers angrily demanding rebookings, complaining about an uncooperative engine, was replaced by a stunned, funereal silence. They were all witnesses to something far more profound than a mechanical failure. They had watched a life implode. Alani gathered her things. As she passed 1D, she paused. Caroline Baxter had not moved. She was just sitting there, her designer purse in her lap, her pashmina askew. She looked like a store mannequin that had been tipped over and righted, all her haughty animation gone. A gate agent, Sarah, was now at her side, speaking in the gentle, firm tones one uses for the deeply traumatized. "Mrs. Baxter, Ma'am, we need you to come with us. We have to deplane. We have your things." Caroline didn't respond. She just stared forward. "Ma'am, please," Sarah urged. We have to sweep the seat." At that, Caroline flinched. She looked up at Sarah, her eyes hollow. "They took him," she whispered. "Yes, Ma'am. You need to come with us now." Slowly, like an old woman, Caroline Baxter stood. She fumbled with her carry-on, and a gold lipstick rolled out, clattering onto the floor. She didn't bother to pick it up. Alani watched as Sarah, the gate agent, gently guided the broken woman off the plane. Alani was one of the last to leave. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, Captain Foley was there, standing by the door. "Dr. Williams," he said, his face etched with fatigue. "Captain, I want to apologize, not just for the delay, but for what you were subjected to. That was unacceptable. You handled yourself with a level of grace that I, frankly, find astonishing." "You handled it, Captain," Alani said, giving him a small, appreciative nod. "You made the right call." "It seems I did, just not for the reasons I thought," he mused. "In 30 years of flying, I've never seen anything like that. An arrest, right on the plane. First time for everything, I suppose," Alani said. "What happens now?" We're all grounded for the night. The crew has timed out. The aircraft is, well, it's a mess. They'll have to rebook everyone. The flagship lounge is going to be a war zone. As a concierge key, he said, you should be able to get priority rebooking. Go to the service desk. Tell them I sent you. Thank you, Captain. Good luck. You too, Doctor. I hope you make your meeting. The terminal was buzzing. Word had already spread, and the videos were, no doubt, already hitting social media. Passengers from the flight were huddled in small groups, whispering, their phones out. Alani bypassed the chaos and headed straight to the rebooking desk in the lounge. The agent, a woman named Maria, looked up and sighed. Let me guess. AA 100? AA 100, Alani confirmed. Dr. Alani Williams, I need the first flight to London tomorrow, whatever it takes. Maria's fingers flew across the keyboard. Dr. Williams, concierge key. Oh, thank goodness. You're at the top of the list. The next flight, AA 114, leaves at 8:30 a.m. I can confirm you in 1A on that flight right now. Perfect. Thank you, Maria. You're a lifesaver. It's the least we can do. I'll have a hotel and meal voucher sent to your app. The TWA hotel. That's perfect. Alani found a quiet corner in the now crowded lounge. She had lost a night. She needed to contact her team. She pulled out her phone, and that's when she saw it. 22 missed calls, 47 text messages, all from her CFO, Richard, and her legal team. Her blood ran cold. This was not about the flight. This was about the deal. Richard, what's wrong? She said, as soon as he picked up. Alani, my God, where are you? Are you on the plane? Richard's voice was frantic. No, I'm at JFK. The flight was grounded. Long story. What's happening? Did Solstice back out? No, they... Alani, the deal just exploded. In a good way. A great way. You are not going to believe this. Richard, I'm not in the mood for games. What happened? Baxter Holdings, he yelled into the phone. They just imploded. The primary creditor for Solstice, the ones who were choking the life out of them and holding up our deal. The FBI just arrested the CEO, David Baxter, at JFK. He was apparently trying to flee the country. Alani sat down. She felt lightheaded. David. Baxter, she repeated, her voice numb. Yes. David and Caroline Baxter. A massive, massive fraud scheme. They were running a Ponzi, using Solstice Green Energy as their personal piggy bank. They were the ones driving it into the ground, shorting its stock, and blocking our acquisition, hoping to buy up the last of the assets in a fire sale before the whole thing collapsed. Alani looked up at the lounge television. The local news was on. And there, in grainy, zoomed-in smartphone footage, was the image of David Baxter being led in handcuffs off her flight. Alani, are you there? I'm here, Richard, she said, her voice a whisper. I'm here. Richard, the Baxters. They were on my flight. What? They were in my cabin. David and Caroline Baxter. The woman, she tried to steal my seat. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. You're kidding me. I am not kidding you, Richard. The reason my flight was grounded was because the FBI came on board to arrest the man whose crimes I am flying to London to clean up. Alani put her head in her hands, not in despair, but in sheer, dumbfounded awe. The universe didn't just serve karma, it served it with a side of theatrical, unbelievable irony. So, what does this mean for the deal? She asked. It means, Richard said, and she could hear the massive, joyous grin in his voice. It means our biggest obstacle is gone. Baxter Holdings' assets are frozen. Their claim on Solstice is voided. The company isn't just salvageable, it's practically gift-wrapped for us. The board in London is ecstatic. They're hailing you as a hero, though I don't think they know why. Alani started to laugh. It began as a small, hysterical chuckle and grew into a full, shoulders-shaking laugh of pure, unadulterated release. The stress of the deal, the confrontation, the flight. It all washed away. The Baxters hadn't just been rude. They hadn't just been racist. They had been desperate. They were rats on a sinking ship, lashing out at anyone and everyone on their way down. And Caroline, in her final, arrogant act of entitlement, had picked a fight with the one person who was, unknowingly, about to profit from her entire life's ruin. She had tried to steal the seat of the woman who was, in effect, about to buy her entire bankrupt world for pennies on the dollar. The TWA Hotel at JFK is a monument to a different era of travel, a sleek, retro-futuristic cathedral of concrete and glass. Alani checked into her room, the silence of the space a stark contrast to the chaos of the terminal. She stood at the window, watching the planes take off and land in the night, a mesmerizing, endless ballet of red and white lights. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Billionaire real estate mogul David Baxter arrested at JFK in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. She clicked the link. The story was still developing, but the details were damning. Baxter Holdings, a company built on a facade of old money respectability, was in reality a hollow shell. David and Carolyn Baxter had been living a lie for decades, defrauding investors, defaulting on loans, and siphoning money from the very companies they were supposed to be supporting, companies like Solstice Green Energy. They were fleeing to London, which had no extradition treaty for their specific, cleverly worded crimes, to a penthouse they had bought with stolen money. AA-100 was their escape flight. Alani closed the article. She finally understood the sheer, venomous rage from Caroline. It wasn't just about a seat. It wasn't just about race. It was about status. To Caroline Baxter, status was everything. It was the clothes, the luggage, the first-class ticket. Her entire identity was built on the performance of wealth. Alani, in her quiet, understated, and utterly earned success, was a living, breathing indictment of Caroline's fraudulent life. When Caroline looked at Alani, she didn't just see a black woman. She saw legitimacy. She saw everything she was pretending to be, and she couldn't stand it. The seat, 1A, was her last, pathetic attempt to claim a power she knew, deep down, she didn't have. She was fighting for a window seat on a flight she should never have been on, a flight that was, in all senses, her last. And the karma. Alani marveled at its beautiful, brutal precision. If the Baxters had been polite, if Carolyn had just said, "Oh, my mistake," and moved, if David hadn't been an aggressive, racist fool, the confrontation would never have happened. The captain would never have been called. The flight would never have been delayed. The armed and ready door would have been sealed, and when the FBI arrived at the gate, they would have been 5 minutes too late. The plane would have been pushing back. They would not have been able to stop it. The Baxters would have escaped. They would have landed in London, disappeared into their penthouse, and the Solstice deal would have been hopelessly entangled in their fraudulent debt for years. Ethelred Renewables would have walked away. Hundreds of jobs at Solstice would have been lost. Alani's refusal to be bullied, her insistence on her rightful place, was the single, random variable that had brought their entire empire crashing down. Her presence in that seat, or rather her fight for it, had grounded the flight long enough for justice to open the door. Alani slept for 6 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke at 5 a.m., ordered coffee, and spent 2 hours on a video call with her legal team, rewriting the acquisition offer. It was no longer a rescue. It was a liberation. She dressed in a fresh suit, this one a sharp, powerful navy blue. She packed her bag, her movements efficient and light. she felt a foot taller. She walked back through the terminal. The morning news was on every screen, the Baxters' mugshots plastered for the world to see. Caroline's photo, taken after hours of processing, was a revelation. Stripped of her makeup, her pashmina, and her privilege, she was just a tired, frightened, and utterly ordinary old woman. Alani arrived at Gate 12 for AA 104. The gate agent smiled. "Good morning, Dr. Williams. We've been expecting you." The new cabin crew was waiting. The new purser, a woman named Beth, greeted her at the door. "Dr. Williams, welcome aboard. We heard about last night." Alani raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure you did." "On behalf of the airline," Beth said, her voice low and sincere, "we are profoundly sorry. And on behalf of this crew, well, it's an honor to have you." "The honor is mine, Beth. I just want a quiet flight." "You've got it. 1A is waiting for you." Alani walked to her seat. It was the same seat, on the same model of aircraft, but it felt entirely different. It felt like hers. She sat down. "Can I get you some pre-departure champagne, Dr. Williams?" Beth asked. "Or sparkling water?" Alani smiled. "The champagne today. I think I'll celebrate." As she settled in, she saw the last passenger for first class board. It was the British actress from the night before. She saw Alani, her eyes widened in recognition, and she stopped. The actress walked over. You're her, from last night." "I am," Alani said. The actress broke into a huge grin. "My agent is already on the phone. We think it's a movie. The Flight of Justice. Or something. The point is, that was the most magnificent thing I have ever seen." She raised her hand. Alani, surprised, raised hers. They high-fived, right there in the aisle. "Have a brilliant flight," the actress said, and went to her seat. Alani laughed, a real, genuine laugh. The cabin door closed, the jet bridge retracted. The captain's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to American Airlines 104, with non-stop service to London Heathrow. We're pushing back right on time. Flight time will be 7 hours and 10 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The engine spooled up. Alani Williams sipped her champagne. She opened her laptop, the Project Solstice file gleaming on the screen. She looked out the window as the plane taxied, and as it rocketed into the sky, she left the entire sordid affair on the ground. She had a company to save. The London meeting was not a negotiation. It was a coronation. When Alani Williams walked into the Solstice Green Energy boardroom, she was met with a standing ovation. The board, composed of aging British engineers and one very flustered young COO, had been staring into the abyss. The news of the Baxters' arrest had been their dewy drops from heaven moment. Alani, by association, was their savior. "Dr. Williams." Alani, the chairman, a man named Sir Philip Hargrove, said, his hands shaking slightly. We don't know what to say. We were days from receivership. Baxter Holdings was choking us, demanding payments we couldn't make, blocking your offer. And now, they're just gone." "They are, Sir Philip," Alani said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Which means their toxic debt is no longer part of this equation. Ethelred is prepared to acquire Solstice, effective immediately. We will absorb your operational staff, protect your pensions, and most importantly, we will fund your Solstice wave energy patent to the tune of £200 million. The room erupted. People were crying. The young COO, in his enthusiasm, almost knocked over the water carafe. "What's the catch?" he asked, his face flushed. "The catch," Alani said, her smile sharp, "is that you all work for me now. And I work you hard. We have a planet to save, gentlemen, and we're behind schedule." The deal was signed before lunch. The press release hit the wires an hour later. Ethelred Renewables acquires Solstice Green Energy in landmark deal, pledges massive investment in UK green tech. Ethelred's stock surged 18% by the closing bell. Alani's personal net worth, not that she was checking, jumped by a figure that would have made David Baxter's entire fraudulent scheme look like pocket change. She spent 3 days in London, integrating the teams. She was in a whirlwind of meetings, site visits, and press interviews. She was hailed as a visionary, a transatlantic titan of tech, as one fawning Times article put it. On her flight back to New York, this time on the AA-107, and yes, in 1A, she finally had a moment to herself. She unfastened her heels and pulled up a news feed. The Baxter case had become a full-blown media sensation. David Baxter had been denied bail. He was a flight risk, the judge ruled, with a certain dry humor. The list of their seized assets was staggering. The New York penthouse, the Hamptons estate, a villa in Tuscany, a dozen supercars, and a collection of fraudulent modern art. They were, in the parlance of the court, functionally destitute. But the real story was Caroline. After being served her subpoena, she had, in a fit of delusion, tried to use her American Express Centurion card to book a different flight out of the country. The card, of course, was declined. The federal agents who were tailing her arrested her on the spot for attempting to flee and for conspiracy. The last photo of her was not a composed mug shot. It was a paparazzi snap of her being led, crying from the Swiss Air check-in counter, her designer luggage being seized as evidence. Alani closed the tablet. It was done. She thought about the seat. 1A. It was just a chair, just a spot on a plane. But in that moment, it had become a symbol. Caroline, in her desperation, had tried to take it, to own it as a last gasp of a status she had never earned. She believed it was her right. Alani knew different. The seat wasn't a right, it was a result. It was the result of 20-hour workdays. It was the result of a PhD in applied physics. It was the result of fighting skeptical venture capitalists, of breaking glass ceilings, of building a company from nothing but an idea and an unbreakable will. She hadn't been given the seat. She had earned it. The flight attendant, a different one this time, came by. "Dr. Williams? Anything else before we dim the lights for the night?" Alani looked out the window at the vast, dark ocean below, the stars bright above. She was flying home, her company stronger, her future brighter, and her purpose clearer than ever. "No, thank you," Alani Williams said, settling back into her seat. "I have everything I need." 6 months later, the air was not the sterile, recycled atmosphere of a first-class cabin, but the sharp, salt-scoured wind of the Orkney Islands. Dr. Alani Williams stood on an observation gantry, her hand gripping a cold metal rail. Below her, the North Sea, a churning mass of dark teal and white, slammed against the massive yellow turbines of the newly christened Ethelred Solstice tidal array. She was in a hard hat and a heavy-duty Ethelred-branded jacket. The wind whipped her hair, but her eyes were fixed on the digital output screen. They were online, ahead of schedule. The Solstice patent, once a theoretical dream languishing in a bankrupt company's files, was now a reality, powering over 50,000 Scottish homes. Beside her, Ben, the young, formerly frantic COO of Solstice, was now the confident director of European operations. "I still read the news alerts, you know," he said, his voice raised over the roar of the sea. "About the Baxters. I suppose I'm looking for closure." Alani nodded, not taking her eyes off the turbine. "And did you find it?" David Baxter took a plea. 25 years, Ben said. He turned on everyone, including his wife, Caroline. She tried to fight it, claimed she was just a devoted spouse, who signed what she was told. The jury convicted her in 45 minutes. 10 years for conspiracy. He paused, then added, "The auction for their assets concluded last week. That penthouse in London? The one they were fleeing to. It was bought by a sovereign wealth fund. All their designer clothes, the jewelry, sold for pennies on the dollar to pay back a fraction of what they stole." Alani finally looked away from the sea. She thought of Caroline in her beige pashmina, sneering about panache. She thought of her trying to steal a seat, a pathetic last grab for a status that was already evaporating beneath her. "That isn't closure, Ben," Alani said, her voice firm. "That's just an ending." She pointed to the massive spinning turbine, a monument of steel and engineering harnessing the power of the planet. "This is closure. This is what we build from the wreckage. They were a void, a black hole of debt and fraud. We are a power source." A notification pinged on her phone. It wasn't from her team. It was an email from American Airlines. Not a form letter, but a personal message from Captain Foley. He was retiring. His last flight had been a week prior. "Dr. Williams," he wrote, "I've thought about that night often. In 30 years, I've dealt with engine failures, medical emergencies, and storms. But I've never seen such a potent combination of justice and, well, timing. You taught my younger crew a lesson that night, that authority isn't about the uniform you wear, but about the integrity you hold. Thank you for your grace. Fly safe." Alani smiled, tucking the phone away. She had a new flight to catch, not to London, but to Tokyo, for the next acquisition. She walked back toward the command center, the wind at her back. She had long since forgotten the petty humiliation of the confrontation, but she had never forgotten the lesson. The world is full of people who believe they are entitled to your seat. The only response is to not only claim it, but to build an empire from it. And that, right there, is what you call jet-fueled karma. The story of Dr. Alani Williams and the Baxters isn't just a wild tale of a flight grounded by the FBI. It's a powerful real-life lesson. It shows what happens when entitlement, arrogance, and deep-seated prejudice collide with quiet, unshakable competence. Caroline Baxter thought she was just stealing a seat, but she was really picking a fight with the very person who represented the justice she was fleeing. What do you think? Was this the most satisfying takedown you've ever heard of? Have you ever witnessed someone's privilege get checked so hard, so publicly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of instant karma and a powerful CEO getting the last laugh, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, click subscribe and ring that bell. We have so many more incredible true-life stories coming your way.